Yeah, I thought off the grid meant that you like had solar panels and like a composting toilet.
That
What it
too.
really means is that you're going to jail forever. I've been confused for years about that.
It depends on as they say, context is everything.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
sure it
Right.
still does mean composted toilet somewhere. So
Okay.
be careful
Okay.
with how you go with that.
I'm going
Yes.
to be living off the grid. That's what I'm going to tell. That's what I'm going to tell everybody
Yes.
when I go to jail.
You'll be in jail until Star Trek becomes reality.
Right.
So then just to kind of illustrate this for the audience, that's why you could maybe have, for example, one of our cases was the case of Darren Berg, who ran a Ponzi scheme in Washington State. And I think it was the biggest Ponzi scheme in Washington State, but it was like $150 million or something.
Sure, and that's a huge amount, right?
That's an enormous amount. And I think, Greg, do you recall? I don't recall what his sentence ended up being.
It doesn't matter because he broke out of jail.
He did break out of
that's a
jail,
problem.
but it wasn't a short sentence. But it wasn't like in the case of like the easy one is Bernard Madoff, who was sentenced to 125 years or something.
I think 150.
Yeah, right. And so like in the case, and even though those are both in both cases, just the scale of Madoff's fraud was a key determinant in him getting 150 years versus someone who does like, $150 million.
Right.
Yes, still a lot of money, especially relative to the victims. But if I understand the sentencing guidelines right, it could be like 15 years or 20 years or maybe 25 years.
Well, that's where, okay, so, sort of toggles back and forth.
Yeah.
For a much smaller fraud, okay, say much smaller, say it's $1 million fraud.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got two layers. First, you've got, I was charged under mail fraud. And how many counts have I been charged? And so your Bernie Madoff, that's how they got to 150. Like they just counted up all the counts and they added everything up, right? And you can charge me in multiple counts because there's the actual conspiracy to defraud. There also often is multiple defraudings, right? And so there could be underlying activities that I can say each of these was a fraud. It's like each victim or something, or each time I spoke to you to get more money, that's another fraud. But there also could be, I could charge you under different fraud statutes. So say I'm a doctor who defrauds Medicare or something like that. I might have both a wire fraud, but also a healthcare fraud, right? And so there are these ways in which those numbers can start to look remarkably high if we're talking about the statutory maximum relative to what you've actually done, okay? But for certain defendants, it's the flip, which is you stole $1 billion and there's just nothing in the guidelines range that even comes close to getting there. So in that case, you're already off the grid. You're like the highest that the guidelines can give you. So now the statutory maximum actually kicks in.